Welcome to Merrily End. My name is Mark Machado. I'm joined, as always, by Dominic Machado, my cousin in the US, and Nick Brookes, who is on the delightful tropical island of Jamaica. But trust me, he knows a lot about shrunken cricket. His book, if you haven't got it, you should order it or ask Santa for it for Christmas. And Islands 11, it's basically won all the cricketing book writing awards there is to win. In fact, I think they might be in the process of creating new ones for Nick to win. Um, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and also subscribe to our Substack. We put a newsletter out at the beginning now of every week, and it's got loads of great stuff about Sri Lankan cricket. It's all in English. You can get it translated because the internet's magical if you wanted to read it in any language you want. But we've got a lot to chat about during the duration of this. Sri Lanka have a new selection committee. We've sold Elvis and bought the Beatles, we're hoping. Dom, do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so the rumors have been swirling for about a week now about the composition of a new selection committee after the dissolution of Pramodia Wickramasinghe's previous selection committee. And it seems like Haran Fernando has brought in a younger, newer set of selectors, five of them. We've got Upal Tharanga, who is the chairman. We've got Ajantha Mendes, we've got Indica Deserum, we've got Dilruwan Pereira, and we've got Thuranga Paranavatana. Always a mouthful to say. And so we've got five cricketers, many of whom are still playing cricket at some level, some first class cricket. And we're sort of the last generation of Sri Lankan cricketers. Now we have to think, what is the impact going to be on Pramodia's youth selection policy, where over the last 2 years he has prioritized youth in terms of selections, and he's tried to be as consistent as possible. And I think we've seen a crop of cricketers who hopefully will be the core of our team going forward, identified, given playing time, and now kind of showing the initial fruits of that labor. But one of the things that's a bit scary is it seems that in interviews, Jonathan Mendes, Upal Tharanga have been noting the absence of seniors, and these seniors are not just any old seniors, but people they played with in their careers, the likes of Isra Udana, Desura Pereira, Angelo Mathews, Lahiru Tirimana. So that leaves a lot of intrigue as to what the selection for this tour, the Zimbabwe's tour of Sri Lanka, is going to look like, especially with a T20 World Cup on the horizon.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think is that a cat you've got in the background, Nick? We're gonna have to address
Yeah, man.
the noise.
This is Yum Yum,
Oh
who's been
Oh,
rescued from a local mechanic. He's full of beans, so sorry about him.
no, it sounds like Yum Yum's got a lot of views in the selectors, and I'm sure we can make time for Yum Yum. I mean, everyone else in Sri Lanka has. Nick, were you surprised? My first take on it when I heard that this crop of people have been selected to be the selectors was that can't be right. They're way too young to do that. They're not much older than me. But
Uh,
actually, go on, Nick.
no, yeah, man. I was just going to say it makes you feel old, doesn't it? It's like when
Yeah.
Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard became football managers, and you're like, this can't be right.
Yeah, it's like why they let these young boys do it, and it's I suppose in a way it's counterintuitive that they've brought kind of younger selectors in, and their first thing that they're trying to do is or we think they might try and do is bring back the older players. Um, I mean, it just seems like such a circular argument that we end up or discussion that we end up having on whether or not the senior players should be involved in cricket. I mean, Isaru Udana and Thisara Pereira, I know their two names have both been mooted. Those two have not just stepped away from
Hmm.
international cricket, but they've made a point to play Legends games. That like they're going to be the first two international players to play Legends tournaments and end up reversing their retirement and coming back and playing stuff. I mean, what I will say is in kind of recent iterations of the LPL, I have said afterwards, I think Tissera Pereira is one of our better players of T20. I mean, the stats back that up. If you look at last kind of since the beginning of the LPL, he's captained a decent side. Um, I think we know he's definitely friends with some of the selectors as well. This can't be a case of jobs for the boys, though. It just feels like all the work that's been put in over the last few years can't have amounted to a pretty poor showing in an Asia Cup final and a whimper of a 50 over World Cup. Surely not, Nick, is it?
Yeah, you'd hope not. I mean, I think that Ajanta Mendes interview, which Dom mentioned and that we've all seen, was really worrying. Some of the names that were being brought up there, guys, like Lakmal and Thiramani, who you think, I mean, just like, where is he? Is he still in 2015? And I mean, we've said it time and again that, I mean, I know Pramodia hasn't been universally popular, but he promoted youth, and his tenure was characterized by a stability which has been lacking for a long time. And I hope that this batch of selectors can build upon that rather than tearing it all up and turning Sri Lanka into Uncle's CC. Because, I mean, something like seeing Dunith Walalage while he's still at school coming into the side and starting to make waves and get comfortable in international cricket. We've seen Tikshana and Patirana come in really young. So I hope that we do see a continuation of that youth policy and that it isn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And you'd have to say that, I mean, one good thing is, at least, I mean, it feels like Dilly Pereira was playing Test cricket kind of like 5 minutes ago. And so, I mean, at least these guys who are now in charge have some understanding and recent memories of the way Sri Lankan cricket works, and of being on the other side of a administration which can sometimes be hostile or inscrutable or difficult to deal with. And I hope they bring that into their own running of cricket.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think is quite interesting, right? If you look at someone like Ajanta Mendis's career and his what he achieved in cricket, he probably the Sri Lankan talent who suffered the most from how quickly the game is evolving and how quickly it develops. You look about what he's done with certain players that we know he's worked with, like Teacher and stuff, and so on. You're like, actually, maybe in terms of thinking, in terms of the way they're thinking about it, it's not necessarily, there is some positives about it. I think the real key thing though is what is this selection committee's relationship going to be like with Mahela Jayawardena,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Because he is the brain behind it all. It's all his friends are in the setup already, and taking the youth teams and the development teams, the emerging teams, and even the women's teams. So he's the guy with the grand plan here. How will they work with him? How will they fit in with him? Mahela, in that interview that he gave during the World Cup, I thought was quite diplomatic with some of his answers around whether or not the uncles have a place. Um, so, I mean, it's Sri Lankan cricket, right? Win, lose, or draw. It's going to be a wild ride either which way, every which way. And I think the next 6 months going into this World Cup in the United States and the Caribbean could be quite wild. I suspect, though, I mean, I just can't believe all the names that are being associated with it. I can't believe they're going to bring Chandamar back. I can't believe they're going to bring Udana back. Tiramani, as far as I'm aware, is retired and living in Australia. I just can't believe that they're going to bring them back to try and play
Yeah.
some cricket, some white ball cricket, right?
And I mean, it does bring some excitement for the Zimbabwe squad, right? Because now you're looking at that like it's picking names out of a hat. Anyone could be in that squad.
And just to remind people, right, these are not players who were there in 2013 or 2014 or 20, I mean, some of them were around the squad, but these are players who were supposed to take over the team in 2016, 2017. So I just thought I'd bring up that 6 years ago from today, Rohit Sharma hit a 200, hit a double hundred. He scored India scored 392 against a Sri Lankan team led by Thisara Perera, including Angelo Mathews, Lahiru Thirimana, Suranga Lakmal, Sachit Patirana, all these guys are being spoken of as being brought back, the uncles, as it were. And so India bats first, scores 392 for four. Um, Sri Lanka bats second and scores 251 for eight. Angelo Mathews scoring an unbeaten 111. And that tells you a little bit about that, right? It's a score of 392. You shouldn't be batting the overs and getting 251. That is absolutely ridiculous. And that shows you already, 6 years ago, we're talking about cricketers who probably were moving towards over the hill. So the thought that we would bring them back in 2023 to play T20 cricket, right? The game that moves fastest and is the most advanced, is ludicrous. And we've just got to hope that Mahela has some interaction and influence with them. I think one factor to consider is that Mahela blooded, right? A lot of these guys, Upal Tharanga, right? He blooded a Jonathan Mendes, Thisara Pereira, right? He believed in all these guys early in their career and gave many of them their first big shot in international cricket. So I'd imagine there's got to be some level of respect there, and hopefully they can work together and use those opportunities that they had working together as players to produce a decent squad. Yeah, so a lot of intrigue, as you said, Mark.
I I wonder if this is the end of the kind of the players from the 90s kind of having a say. I mean, it won't be. It's Sri Lanka cricket. There'll be this time next year, like, all the names from the late 80s and early 90s who in the side will be back being selectors, and we'll be doing something else. We'll be moving in a totally different direction again. But I wonder if this is actually a wider change, a wider sea change that's happening, and that actually, new sportsmen, the Harry Fernando's come in. He's back doing to his old role when Sri Lankan cricket was kind of, I want to say, in terms of an administrative point of view, marginally more stable than it is now, because it wasn't suspended. He's trying to reverse that suspension, and he's got people into positions now, youngsters or relatively younger players. There's some question marks over the Uncle CC. Personally, I think we might get Angelo sticking about in the squad a little bit more, and maybe they might try and bring back Chandimal because he's been in the squad relatively recently, into kind of into the T20 setup. I think beyond that, I think it's a real stretch to see if the others come back in. I just can't believe it's gonna happen.
I feel like the guy who could actually be useful is someone like Nuwan Pradeep, right? And a backup pace bowler who's still playing, right? A little bit older. You want a senior guy on your side. He's someone who's still playing, who's still pretty good. But yeah, it's wild.
I think the question has to be is why are quite a number of senior Sri Lankan players, older retired senior Sri Lankan players, saying they need to bring these senior players back. I think the core problem that they're trying to address is a kind of lack of leadership, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's a lack of somebody who's going to go, do you know what? I'm just going to sit here and bat it out. I'm just going to stick about, or I'm going to face the next 20 overs and just go for 20 runs because we just need to be in a position to lose no wickets. The thing is, for me, and obviously I'm not anywhere near the squad in terms of geographically, but from the performances I see, I think that leadership might be coming into the squad. They might be developing it naturally. And I can't think of the players that they're looking to bring in, apart from maybe the odd. Angelo Mathews has done it in the past a number of times. And maybe you can say occasionally Chandimal's done it. With the others, it's not really happened that consistently, right? I don't think Sri Lanka are really missing out on the player that's going to drag them over the line in a difficult situation by not picking Isaru Udana. I think Udana's had so many opportunities, and he was probably in some ways, I'm really, when you look at the way what he's achieved as a player, it's really impressive. But he probably feels that he probably didn't do the best or didn't have the moments with the cricket with the national side he should have had. And I get that. I don't think giving him another chance. What we're talking, he's like 5, 6 years out of his prime now. I don't think we're going to get that out of him. I don't think we're going to see him start playing match-winning innings all over the place. And also, if he plays a match-winning innings against Zimbabwe, so what? What I care about, really, if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, is who's going to when the going gets tough, who's going to stick their hands up when we're in the Caribbean and we need to beat Zimbabwe to get to the semi-finals, or South Africa or someone else to beat the. And I don't think these guys are it. And I think there's more likely actually now the positions that they're in. If you look at going into this tournament, somebody like Nisanka or Asalanka, they'd have played the last 3 or 4, last 3 major ICC tournaments. So they're going into it now with quite a lot of experience. We've seen them, both those players, put really good knocks and really start to really get good averages in both formats of white ball cricket. I think those are the 2 players that could develop into the leaders if we can get the right coaching, the right psychologists, and the right people around them to give them the right, push them into the right direction. I'm ranting now. Am I wrong, Nick?
No, I don't think you're wrong at all. I'd actually like to see Hasaranga be the guy to step up and be the white ball captain. I know it's asking a lot of him, as you know, he's the star, he's the sort of leading strike bowler, and Sri Lanka are probably going to look for more runs for him moving forward. But he's just got that feel to me. He's got a bit of swagger, like he can really be a talismanic cricketer. And you know, I know he's young, but I think he's must be older than Angelo is when he first got the job. And yeah, so I think that, like you say, building around the guys who've been in the team for the last 3 or 4 years and who've now got 3 major tournaments behind them is the way to go. And there is a core and there's a nucleus there. And I think it just keeps needing to be, you know, strengthened, adding a little ingredient here or there, but throwing it all out and starting to make a new dish, I don't think is the way to go at all.
Absolutely. I think we've been at the almost stage the last 12 months. It's now time to take it from, well, they were almost there, to let's actually win those matches. And I think, as both of you are saying, leadership is going to be super important. And I think one guy you can't count out of this discussion is Dasun Shanaka. There's no doubt that he's done well as a leader, and certainly in the T20 format, he has performed well enough, and there's no one who can play his role at the moment quite like he can. So I'm hopeful that he retains his place. He's an older guy. It seems like the other players trust him and know that he's not going to do anything that jeopardizes their place in the squad for his own sake, right? He's always fallen on the sword for his players. So I think even in the short term, someone like Dasun Shanaka could still lead this team, and then soliciting more input, I think, from the likes of Kusal Mendes and Wanindu Hasaranga, because they've shown themselves to be a bit more dynamic about field placements, about ways of getting people out. So kind of fusing that and saying, okay, here's our central brain trust that's going to work together to actually provide that leadership. Because I think we've seen, we're not like, you know, a team like India or Pakistan where there's a Virat Kohli or a Babar Azam who's just going to do it for us day in and day out. It has to be every person contributing. And when we've been successful, that's what it is. Every person plays their role and does their role. And obviously, Hasaranga is a talisman, but you know, we have injuries, things happen. So I just like to see that collective group work together and kind of finish the job that they started in 2021 with a really good stellar performance here in 2024.
Nick, do you want to put Yam Yam on the table now to hear their view of the selectors? So it probably makes more sense than half what we're saying anyway.
He's gone missing, man. I think he was really he heard about Pramodya's sacking and he's run off.
Oh no, he probably fears he might get a call. Uncles and cats. Right, so we move on. In other big kind of Sri Lanka news this week, Chamari Athapaththu, definitely Sri Lanka's player of the year this year. calendar year has failed yet again to get picked up by a women's Premier League club, which is the women's IPL. Um, it's it's just so disappointing, and it's really hard to explain, right, Nick?
Yeah, it is, and I think it was telling that the Sri Lankan cricket scene's been complaining about this for a long time, and this was the first time that I really saw an international outrage about Chamari's omission. Like I saw, multiple journalists from India, England, just basically saying, "What on earth is going on?" As I understand it, there was the sort of the explanation I've had is that there weren't that many opening slots going, and Danny Wyatt was picked, so that was sort of like all it was. I don't want to slate Danny White because I think she's a great cricketer. And she just made 75 against India, which I mean, we know there's that recency bias often in these auctions, but it's really difficult to explain. Like Chamari had an outstanding WBBL, as we've talked about a lot. She's a multifaceted cricketer. She's a leader. She bowls tidy overs. If strike rate was maybe something, a stick that she could have been beaten with in the past, it seems like that is no longer problem at all. So it's really just totally inscrutable, and I don't think any of us have any explanation other than the fact that it's just a lazy she's Sri Lankan, they're not a top nation in terms of women's cricket, and so we're not picking her.
The Dogs of Jamaica are definitely in solidarity with the Sri Lanka
they're
fans over.
they're outraged.
Yeah. Maybe is it Deandra Dotton didn't get picked as well? She
Yeah.
she missed out, and maybe that's what the Dogs
Yeah,
are trying to tell us over the airwaves or video, whichever way you're viewing this. Again, just a reminder, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Dom, I know this is a long shot because SLC is in a bit of disrepair or a bit of chaos at the moment. But is it time we just had a women's LPL and started to actually Sri Lanka put themselves out there a bit more as a women's cricketing nation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, it's time for comparable resources for comparable results, right? The men and women's team both sit seventh in the ICC rankings for one day cricket. I think the men are eighth in T20 and the women are seventh in T20. And we know how many resources are being poured into men's cricket, both at the senior national level and at younger levels. And it's time to give the resources for the women to shine because they've been shining even without them, without the proper support, without the school system that supports them. And I think this T10 league is going to go a long ways to establishing more legitimacy for women's cricket on the island. But I think it would be really, really good if they develop the women's version of the LPL. They'll have to find a time in the cricketing calendar, but I think there's plenty of opportunity for it. I think it's something that people will love to watch, and I think maybe they can make it family friendly. I think that would be a really, really good decision on the part of SLC. So young girls can come to the park and see their favorite cricketers play and get inspired to play and see the joy and kind of this jubilation that you see whenever our women play. There's this kind of unrivaled joy. They play as a team, they play hard, and giving them the resources to develop as white ball cricketers, right? And I think it's kind of fun to see Chamari in a mode where she doesn't have to be kind of the main player in the squad, where she can apply her skills as she sees fit rather than what's necessarily best to the team. And I think that'll be good for some of the other women as well, right? I'm not worried about how I'm representing my nation, but I'm playing for my team and I'm playing to represent myself because I think the women have shown themselves to be selfless and we need to reward them for all their hard work. We need to reward them for all their good results. So I'm hoping that T10 league will serve as a launching pad for a T20 league. And I think it'll show people that there's interest on the island about women's cricket and that we're all excited for it and we love to watch them play.
I haven't heard anything about this T10 league in a few months now. I don't know. when it's expected. The dogs of Jamaica might have heard a bit more than I have. I don't know. Nick, women's LPL, you all behind it? Is this the way forward, do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm fully on board. I think it will be a great thing for Sri Lankan cricket, and just to put the women in the shop window a bit more, right? Like,
Mhm.
uh, you know, they haven't played a lot of cricket, have they? I mean, it was when was the England series? I don't think
You
they've
say
had a
that
run out since then.
I think Estelle told me a stat that they'd played more ODIs than any. At some point, they'd played the most ODIs out of any women's team, international team in the world in a calendar year. So I think they're playing about as much cricket as kind of everyone
As
else is
anyone
playing.
is.
Yeah, and
I guess
there is a
there's just
women's
a
World
lot
Cup at the
less
beginning
women's
of next year.
international.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I guess there's just less women's international cricket than there is men's, so you sort of see it like that. But no, I think a women's LPL would be great, and because the talent pool is still fairly small, and that's something that's going to help grow it, isn't it? But yeah, like you, Marky, I don't know what's going on with the T10s. That seems to have disappeared a bit off the face of the earth.
Yeah, I wonder
Yeah.
if part of that was timing because I know mid-November was around the time when they were supposed to do player registration and all of that. And of course, that coincided with the suspension of SLC and the sackings and all that stuff. So I'm hoping it's just a case of a dream deferred and not totally delayed and put off for years. But we've got to just keep on banging the drum and asking about it, and eventually they'll know that there's interest.
Guys, should we leave it there for today? Because I think we've chewed over the kind of two major issues. I don't really want to go into the under-19s Asia Cup debacle because A, I haven't been watching it, and B, that some of those lads are way too young to have us old men talk about their game at this stage. We've still got old uncles to we can mull about over the Matthews and the Chandamals and the Tissera Pereiras of the world for us to talk about and occupy us. I'm sure those kids are. I hope they're having the time of their life, and I hope they're doing everything they will be doing everything they can to win games, and it will all work out well for them in the end. Because Sri Lankan cricket, it just happens. We're more talented than our rivals across the Bay of Bengal. So and the less said about them, the better. Anyway, let's leave it there. If you got all the way to the end and you haven't hit subscribe, that's incredible. Hit the subscribe now. We've been the Muralians. Sign up to the newsletter. It's with you once a week. And we have some great writing in it. From Dom and Nick, and occasionally I write barely coherent things, but they're in there. And we'll be back with you hopefully about this time next week. And if you're celebrating any holidays, happy holidays. We'll see you all later. Bye.